Hey y'all, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make an Italian inspired focaccia bread. I'm going to go with the traditional flavor of rosemary, but you can literally make focaccia bread with any flavor that you choose. I hope you guys enjoy the recipe. Let's cook. So here I'm just adding a little bit of sugar to the bowl. This is going to be what I'm proofing my yeast with. If you don't want to proof yeast, you can always use instant yeast and just go right in and throw all the ingredients together. I'm gonna bloom my yeast first and then we'll get the flour mixed in. I have my water here. I just heated this in the microwave for about 40-45 seconds, and then I'm going to give it about a minute and then I'll add in my yeast. I'm gonna add in 3 teaspoons of yeast. If you've been baking long enough, you will know to the touch like what is the appropriate temperature, but if you're not sure, just pull out a thermometer and test it. The temperature should be anywhere from like 95 degrees to about 110 degrees. Anything over that, you risk killing your yeast. So kind of stick to that range and use a thermometer if you're not 100% sure. Now go ahead and give this a quick mix just to kind of get everything in there, and we'll let that bloom while I'm putting the flour together. Going in with about 1.5 teaspoons of table salt, and I have just about 1 tablespoon of sugar. And then I just like to take a whisk and mix this together to make sure that the dry ingredients are mixed really well together before we start to incorporate anything else. And then you guys can see right here that my yeast has bloomed. You've actually kind of watched it bloom. So that is pretty much good to go. You don't have to let it bloom very long. Once you kind of see that the yeast is alive, most people say like 5 minutes, you should be able to have a fully bloomed yeast. Some people will let it bloom longer, maybe 15, but you can tell that this is like healthy yeast by the fact that it's only been just under a few minutes and it's already bloomed. So I'm gonna grab my dough hook and my olive oil and we'll get mixing. All right, so I'm just gonna pull this down, mix up the yeast, the sugar, and the water a little bit. And then I actually have a fresh sprig of rosemary here, so I'm gonna start to kind of peel this in. The easier way to do this would be to grab the center and kind of run your hand down the stem. And this will flavor the bread very nicely. Rosemary is one of those ingredients you really don't want to add a ton of it to your dish because it is extremely strong and can be overpowering if too much is used. So I think this is like plenty to give us some really good flavor. Plus we're going to add a few teaspoons, about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of dried rosemary on top. So we have that in. That is super fragrant. I'm gonna add in about half the flour. Allow the dough to start coming together. Then I'm gonna go ahead and add in the rest of my flour. And once this starts to come mostly together, I'm going to add in the oil. So now that the dough has come together, you can see we have like a nice, slightly sticky dough, but a dough that pretty much comes together, and that's kind of what you want from this. Ultimately, what's going to end up happening, you're going to add more oil, so it will allow the dough, it won't be as sticky, but it will allow the dough to move a little bit better. Focaccia is really like an oil kind of based bread, so you don't want too much water because it's not what you're going for. It's a really dense bread, but you get like that like nice crispiness from that oil in the bread. So I went ahead and oiled my bowl with some more olive oil and some extra virgin olive oil, and I'm gonna go ahead and put my dough in here. For the first rise, we're gonna allow it to rest for about an hour, and then we'll pat it down, you know, shape it into the traditional focaccia shape, and then we'll go ahead and let it rest for about 15 minutes before we bake it in a 400-degree oven. But this is a really, really nice sticky dough, and that's what you want from this. You know, you want it moist enough, but not to the point where it's sticking to your hand. So I'm just gonna cover that over with saran wrap, and I'm going to leave it near my window. Right now I'm preheating my oven for something else, so I'm not gonna put it in the oven, but we'll let this rise for an hour, and I'll be back when it's time to press it out. All right, y'all, so my focaccia dough has rested for about an hour. I have here some cornmeal, some dried rosemary, and then I have some more extra virgin olive oil. This bread, one of the reasons I love it is because it's just like so super simple to make. There's just not a lot of fuss over it, and sometimes you need that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just lay down some cornmeal on my baking sheet, and all this is gonna do is prevent the bread from sticking. Even though it has oil in it, you just wanna ensure that it doesn't stick and you get a good coating underneath. And then all I'm gonna do is turn this out, puff it down a little bit, and then turn this out onto my baking sheet. And then we're just gonna press it down and make it stretch out into a square. Now, traditionally, focaccia is made in, I believe it's made in a square, like a square pan. Hopefully I can get this stretched all the way out, but it doesn't have to be perfect. That's one of the good things about it. Like, it's a super rustic kind of bread, and really, if you wanted to leave it in an oval shape, if you wanted to leave it round, you could do that. You know, it really doesn't matter. That's one of the things that makes it even better. And this is one that you really want to get in there with your hands with, because ultimately that's going to be the signature of a focaccia. And what it really does is you press your fingers into it like this, and it makes these like little divots that capture the olive oil that you're going to put on top once the bread is risen. And I'm just gonna add sprinkles of dried rosemary on top. You don't need a ton. And then all I'm gonna do is cover this back over. I'm gonna let it rise for probably about 20 minutes, maybe 30, depending on how high it gets. But this is not one that you wanna let rise and really fluff too much, because it's meant to be like kind of like a thin, flat bread. And in the meantime, make sure you preheat your oven to 400 degrees. All right, y'all, so I let the focaccia rest for about 35 minutes, and this is how much it's risen, and that's pretty good. It'll fluff up a little bit when we bake it in the oven, but again, this is not the type of bread that you want to be super high or airy. So all I'm gonna do now is do a little, very little poking, because I'm not trying to defluff the bread, but I do want to make sure those pockets are there. And then all we're gonna do is drizzle some olive oil over top. And this is extra virgin olive oil. That is the oil that you want to use for this bread. And then we're going to bake this at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes. And then when it comes out, you're gonna brush it with more extra virgin olive oil. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the oven and I'll be back. So this is our finished focaccia. I didn't show it right out of the oven because I had some other stuff that I was doing at the moment, but I went ahead and brushed this with olive oil as soon as it came out the oven, and I took it off the pan for a little bit to actually cool. So ultimately, all you do with this is you can cut it. You can honestly cut it how you like, but typically you just cut this like across and into kind of like squaring it off, and then those rounded pieces will be like nice and round. You can cut them as big or as small as you like. If you're cutting sandwich size, I would suggest maybe running down the middle and then doing maybe like, you know, perpendicular cuts across. But for the sake of showing and tasting, I'm only gonna cut off this little piece. And this is how the bread looks on the inside. So you can still see it's like super nice and moist. Of course you have that oil top, but it's still pretty dense in the middle. So this is like the perfect focaccia, and this is this is such a delicious bread. I hope that you guys will give this a try at home. The recipe will be down in the description box below. Please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss another video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Thanks, bye.